Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including the Senate President calling for a federal investigation into the State Attorney General and Secretary of State. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Cameron Sanchez from KJZZ Radio, Wayne Schutsky, also from KJZZ, and Jim Small from the Arizona Mirror. Panel, good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Cameron, we're going to start with you. Holy smokes, the Senate President wants a federal investigation against the top, two of the top three Democrats in the state.
Yeah, every time I'm worried that we've moved on from 2020, something brings us back. And so we are once again talking about the election. We are talking about concerns of election interference. We're talking about Warren Peterson, who is a Republican, going after Democrats who say that this is, of course, ridiculous. And I have a bad feeling it might end up in court.
So, Wayne, the claim is that the Secretary of State and the Attorney General interfered with the federal probe by what? Like bullying county recorders? What did you do? What's the charge? What's the claim here?
Interference by stern letter, apparently. They wrote these letters to the county recorders. This is after Senator Peterson turned over documents to a federal grand jury subpoena. So they sent letters to these county recorders saying, you guys shouldn't do this. Even if you get a subpoena, we believe that there's concerns about violating state and federal privacy laws, so don't follow course. And then also additionally wrote a letter to Peterson himself asking for more information on what exactly he turned over. So his charge is that those letters effectively amount to trying to stick their noses into this federal investigation, which there's an ongoing grand jury, and ask the DOJ to look into it. And
apparently, I think the letter was, at best, a thinly veiled threat to county recorders, was the claim on Peterson's side.
Right, and it's, it all kind of ties back to the request the Trump administration has made of the state through Secretary of State Adrian Fontes' office to turn over the state's voter rolls unredacted. He has refused so far, and the AG is defending him in this lawsuit that the Trump administration subsequently filed. And essentially their argument is, look, state privacy laws say we can't release this information. Doesn't limit who we can't release it to, says we can't release it, that this is private voter information. And so they've refused to give that to the Trump administration. And I think that the concern now is that the Trump administration running into roadblocks in courts, other courts, they're suing, like 29 states over this exact same thing, that some of the court cases have not gone in favor of the Trump administration. And so that now they're going to try to circumvent the courts and circumvent these laws and impanel grand juries and say that they're investigating things, that they need to have copies of these voter rolls in order to then investigate these cases that may or may not really, I think exist. There may not really be anything there other than a way to try to get this information that they can then do what they had said 6 months ago they wouldn't do, which is turn it over to Homeland Security, so Homeland Security can then scour the voter rolls, look for people who they claim are illegally registered because they're not citizens, and then go out and arrest them.
And again, the Senate President saying this was a pattern of conduct to suggest an inappropriate attempt to interfere with a grand jury investigation. At worst, it was a blatant attempt to strong. This sounds, is he trying to suggest that what the election officials and the Attorney General are trying to do is similar to what, Mark Kelly and Democrats tried to tell enlisted service people, kind of the same thing, like, by the way, don't do that because it's not right?
Well, his claim is that they're interfering with a very above-board federal request, and of course the counter-argument is that they're concerned the federal request is against the law in itself, and so it kind of puts county recorders in this, awkward position, and it makes me wonder how it's going to go county by county, because again, what reminds me of 2020, we got, different boards of supervisors responding to these things in different ways. Mojave County and Cochise County in the past have resisted certifying election results. Maybe they do one thing and then other counties do another thing, and then do we have incomplete information being sent out, and we have some counties not sure who they're supposed to cooperate with, which again, I think just sort of leaves them in the awkward position of not knowing whose orders to follow and potentially ending up in court.
And Attorney General Mays basically said, this is laying the groundwork to deny election results in November.
Yeah, I think they're bringing us all back to the fact that all of this is going back to 2020 to unproven conspiracy theories that those elections were somehow stolen through widespread voter fraud, theories that have never been proven, that have, we've gone through more than a dozen court cases that have not validated any of these claims, post-election audits that are required by state law, even the Senate audit from which Peterson turned records over from ultimately concluded that Joe Biden won the election. So I think they're going back and saying, hey guys, remember, they're saying this is above board, but it's all going back to this one original sin of widespread election fraud in Maricopa County. And so remember that this is the end goal.
Yeah, we're going to get to Cyber Ninjas. We'll return to that in a second here as well. But as the political aspect of this, you got the Senate president running for Attorney General, going after, saying, hey, Feds, you want to investigate my opponent?
It's almost like his campaign might benefit from being able to run ads that say my opponent's being investigated by the Department of Justice for breaking federal law. A Senate could really easily get to that point, and I think that's I think that's pretty obvious that that's part of it as well, right? Adrian Fontes is also running for re-election. I'm sure that if there was a way to wrap Katie Hobbs into that letter and that request for a DOJ investigation, I'm sure that would have happened as well.
Yeah, and we had Fontes, Secretary of State, on the program here, and he's pretty upset about this. He didn't think this was the right thing. But politically, is this the right thing for Republicans? I mean, is this a winning strategy, a winning topic?
I mean, it seems to be one that they're doubling down on, but I'm not sure if it's working out very much in their favor. This whole idea of the executive order of putting together this database using SAVE information and having the Department of Homeland Security essentially decide who's eligible to vote and instructing the post office to get involved. I think, for some people who are really red meat, Republican base, that's like, yay, we're cutting out the fraud. But for a lot of folks, it's like, I don't know if I like, the Department of Homeland Security and the post office being involved in that way that they haven't in the past and asking for our voter information to be turned over. It's also, if we're going back to 2020, it's an old topic. We're beating a horse that died 6 years ago, and it brings up the concern of election fraud into the next election, which I think people maybe are a little bit tired of, even here in Arizona. So I'm not sure it'll have that effect, but yes, it will generate some headlines.
And then we got Senators Kelly and Gallego asking for the Feds, basically the new DHS secretary, along with ICE, to end the election probe. Just let's get it over with. This is a waste of time. It's a waste of resources, especially in these times.
Yeah, so we've got these two agencies essentially operating separate but kind of happening at the same time probes. We got the DOJ one we just talked about, and then at the same time there's been some reporting that DHS asked for some records from the Attorney General's office related to 2020 as well. And so DHS is looking into that. It looks like they're also looking into, again, unproven claims of voter fraud going back to 2020. They got some stuff from Mark Brnovich looking into, his conclusions from the Senate's audit. And Gallego and Kelly basically said, what are you guys doing? This is the investigative arm of DHS. You're supposed to be going after drug traffickers, human traffickers, all that kind of stuff. That's where your resources need to be focused on, not on going after the president's enemies again.
And again, Jim, I mean, is this a winning strategy? Is this a winning idea as far as Republicans? I mean, goodness gracious, the Cyber Ninjas thing was just a borderline. Well, it was a circus, and the results wind up not being what you have a loyal partisan conducting the thing. He'd never done an election survey before his company, and it didn't change the results at all.
Well, no. I mean, I don't think this is a winning strategy at all. I think that this is all of this is happening in service of Donald Trump's ego. He's been beating this drum since 2021. That he, since 2017, really. I mean, he's been talking about all of this stretches back a decade. I don't. No, I think that this is meat for the Republican base, for the MAGA base. But beyond that, no, I think if anything, it's going to alienate more voters. And as you look at all of the things that they're trying to do in the name of stamping out fraud that doesn't exist, that they don't have any proof for, they're going to end up disenfranchising a lot of people and making it a lot harder for millions and millions and millions of Americans to vote. And I think that's a message that has, I think, started to break through. And, we'll see if Democrats keep pounding that message and keep trying to deliver it to voters. But I think that this constant focus on fraud and on 2020 being stolen, I agree with what was said earlier. I think that voters are just done with that, and they're turned off to it.
And if it's a primary vote, that's what you're looking for as far as the red meat for primaries, I mean, I guess we can talk about now the primary regarding the governor, Republican side. And boy, it sounds like Congressman Schweikert and Congressman Biggs, we're starting to get a little friction here.
You know, as soon as Schweikert jumped into this race, I was waiting for this day because he has a bit of a history of being tied to sort of aggressive ads or mailers against his opponents. Previously against Ben Quayle and then against Elijah Norton, he ran mailers, or people advocating for him ran mailers and said, you know, I believe against Quayle it was goes both ways, and then against Norton was isn't being straight with you. And the Norton one actually led to a lawsuit, because Norton was like, you can't, you know, impugn me and talk about my sexuality. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry, we would never do that. Anyways, but here we are. It's not a sexuality thing this time, but he did put out mailers going after Biggs for a history of what he says is like white supremacy, anti-Semitism, mostly through Biggs's ties to certain folks. Like he went on a talk show with this host who has said some pretty outlandish things, including talking about Jewish people needing to be deported, talking about a final solution. Also, Biggs's endorsement of a Texas congressional candidate who likes to make a lot of Nazi jokes, stuff like that. Biggs kind of echoed the sentiments of Maricopa County leaders, which I'm sure we're about to talk about, and said, you know, it's sad that we can't like get along and do what's best for the Republican Party.
Well, that's certainly a pleasant thought there. But let's get back to the Maricopa County Republican Committee here, and they're not happy at all with these attacks against Congressman Biggs.
No, and that's not surprising. I mean, the Maricopa County Republican Committee is kind of loaded with Biggs supporters, and so they're probably not liking this look for him going into the general election, which they think he's going to take the primary. And, you know, they love censuring people over there at the Maricopa. I don't know that they've actually censured Schweikert in this case, but this isn't unusual for them if someone, you know, goes after a member of their ilk to then step up and vocally criticize that person, whether they're a Republican or not.
But Jim, this is politics, and Congressman Biggs has, you know, he's been associated with some of these folks. He's been on these programs. He's endorsed the Texas congressman. I mean, what's wrong here? I mean, he's pointing out what he did.
Well, he is, but you know, it's Republican politics, right? Like I think that you can really throw a dart at any Republican politician, certainly ones at this level, and find people that they've associated with who, you know, who have histories of, you know, posts of saying things that are anti-Semitic and racist and misogynistic and things like that. I mean, that's kind of almost par for the course in Republican politics in a lot of ways these days. I mean, I think that the response back, you know, from the Biggs people and from some other reporting that came out after the initial mailer was that, hey, look, David Schweikert's got some of the, you know, he's associated with maybe not some of the same people, but other people who have said, you know, similar things and taken similar positions. It's, you know, it really just kind of gets to that idea of the bad things not being the racist, the bad things being called the racist. And I think that, you know, that is a mindset that, you know, that I think we've seen people criticize Republicans for and conservatives for over the last number of years. And it seems to be a little, you know, some of that. And, you know, I think David Schweikert is really, frankly, probably behind in the polls in this race. I think Andy Biggs is in the driver's seat. And so they are looking for anything they can do to try to shake voters' confidence in him and voters' backing of him and try to peel people away.
Does this shake voters' confidence in Congressman Biggs? Republican primary voters first.
I would say the Republican primary voters tend to be the folks who this would affect less, these kinds of mailers, especially since it's not Biggs who said it himself. If Biggs went out and said on Twitter or something like, all Jewish people in Arizona need to be deported, I think that would cause more of a stir. But Schweikert saying in the past, Biggs went on a podcast, the guy who hosted the podcast in a separate podcast that was a different time, said this thing that was bad. It's like, should that matter? Maybe. Does it? Maybe not. Not in the primaries anyway. But the Maricopa County vote was not overwhelming. It was like 18-12 or something like that. But it's just a condemnation. It's not even an official censure. So it also doesn't really have that much of an effect. But I think they're hoping for the Republicans not to, you know, eat their own in the primaries and make each other look bad and do damage, because what they really want is to defeat Hobbs in the general election.
Well, does that do damage should Biggs come out of the primary? Does this do damage?
The general election is potentially where it can do damage. Like, all they're doing right now is favors for the Hobbs campaign, which, going back to what Cameron said, is why the county Republican Party is upset about this. You're doing her favors. But I take it a step further on effect on the primary vote. The whole reason Biggs is going on these podcasts is because who do you think is listening to them?
Right.
A lot of Republican primary voters. It's the reason we see state lawmakers go on these podcasts and then and sometimes genuinely get surprised by being confronted by what those people do because apparently they're not doing their due diligence. But there's a reason, this podcast, YouTube shows, all this kind of stuff, super powerful means of connecting with base voters. And so it's kind of like a cyclical thing, like damned if I do, damned if I don't, like go on these shows or don't and potentially lose out on connecting with these voters.
Do we see more from the Schweikert camp on this kind of stuff? Are we going to slash him? As Cameron mentioned, this is not new territory for him.
I would be surprised if we didn't. I mean, I agree with Jim that Schweikert's probably trailing significantly right now, and so he's never been one to give up. So I'd see him continue to swing.
Yeah. Jim, SRP elections were this week. This may be the first time in all my years doing the Journalists Roundtable that we're talking about SRP elections. But this was a big deal because of Turning Point Action and all the money coming in from all sides here. What's going on?
Yeah, this is maybe my first time talking about this and really paying attention to this election. So SRP has this weird Byzantine election to run the utility board. End of the day, you had Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action and all of their money put together a slate of candidates. They went out, they had signs. If you drove anywhere near SRP territory in the last couple of months, you saw signs plastered everywhere. And they had a canvassing effort. They were doing really robust voter outreach to try to get their essentially a slate of people who were opposed to clean energy mandates and increasing clean energy usage in the utility district, try to get them on the board to be able to take over that board. They didn't. At the end, there was a competing slate of clean energy candidates. Turning Point won the presidency and I think the vice presidency of the board, but they did not win control of the board, and the clean energy slate ended up holding on to their control of that, and that's a big deal. Both because it potentially changes the policies that SRP is going to enact, and also. Turning Point really went heavy into this and was really very public about what they were trying to do here, and they ended up failing.
Well, but Turning Point said it was a huge victory and a momentous win because they won the board presidency and vice presidency. They lost some of the majority on these committees and these things, these different boards and advisories. But they called it a momentous win, Cameron.
I can say with confidence, first of all, that I've never talked about an SRP election until now. Wayne has, so I've heard about it. But yeah, anyway, everybody apparently gets to claim victory, which is odd because, it's not like a debate where everyone can say, oh, I won that debate. It's like there were winners and there were losers in this election. And so what they're really saying that they're jazzed about, the Turning Point folks, is that they got the presidency and I think the vice presidency. But the thing is, they don't have the majority of those seats. So the clean energy slate actually was able to flip seats and they actually got what they needed to get. So the whole victory seems like incomplete.
And as an expert on the SRP elections, apparently, 4 times the number of ballots received, I think the Republic reported this, 4 times the number of ballots received than the 2024 vote. And mostly these folks were there because they didn't like Turning Point's presence.
Yeah, as Karen mentioned, I did a podcast about the importance of SRP elections 2 years ago, so I was a little early to the curve. But it did give me an intimate knowledge of how these things work. Yeah, and SRP told me that there were a few different elections happening, but just for this board that we're talking about, the electric company, the big one, 36,000 ballots this time versus 7,500 average over the past few elections, so huge increase. I actually posed the question we're all talking about here to Sandra Kennedy, who lost the presidency election, but is part of that clean energy slate. She still holds on to her seat on the board. She's just not the president. And she said when she saw the results, she was jumping up and down, if that tells you anything about who won here. Because the president, she said, gets to break up ties. And she said, with an 8-6 majority, I don't know how many ties he's going to have to break up.
Oh, interesting. So the huge victory and momentous win, not so huge, not so momentous, huh?
Not according to the clean energy folks.
Jim, test run here for Turning Point's influence come November? What kind of results are we seeing?
Well, I think potentially. I think that this race did kind of serve, maybe as a little bit of like a proving ground for some strategies that may or may not ultimately get rolled out in Arizona or in other states across the country, come time for the July primary here and in the November election. I think it remains to be seen, but I think the fact that there was so much anecdotal evidence, that people showed up to vote because they were really upset about Turning Point's presence and their activities in that election, I think is might be a sobering thought for Republicans and for conservatives kind of moving forward into this election cycle. TPUSA has really been, they've handed over, I think, a lot of the ground game to them. I know the Trump campaign did outsourced a lot of stuff to them in 2024, and the Republican parties here have done some of that, and some of the campaigns have as well. And so I don't know if it's going to give anyone pause, but it might.
And it's had to be considered a power play on TP's part, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting is this isn't the normal TPUSA situation where they're injecting their own candidates into like a race that they've never been involved in before. They were actually just backing a bunch of guys who and women who have run for these positions before, aren't really associated with TPUSA in the past. They just like them more than the other side. And in this case, a few of those folks who had won in the past actually ended up losing. So that kind of answers your question about, did they fail here? The one thing I would caution is that this is a very unique election in terms of how it's set up. Only landowners within the area can vote. So it's hard to extrapolate too far into ramifications for statewide and national. But I think it is definitely a stretch for TPUSA to claim any sort of victory.
Do you have something to add?
No, I was just going to say it was a surprise to me. I mean, I think the last time I remember talking about a Turning Point backed candidate, it was Julie Spilsbury, and they were very successful in that local race. And this is kind of their bread and butter, right? Like this ground game stuff, grassroots, and then pushing really, really hard. And the fact that they didn't do it this time was kind of a shock.
But the success there in Mesa was because that happened, because people saw that, because they're seeing what they're seeing. Could that have been a factor in this election?
I don't know if I want to extrapolate that far, but but like Wayne said, the fact that they were incumbents that we're talking about, that should have made it even easier. That makes it even weirder that they didn't do it.
Cameron, sticking with you, who is Rachel Alexander and who is Sherry Jeridan?
Okay. Rachel Alexander is a former prosecutor who calls herself, I believe, a journalist. She meant to say something else because she got arrested for being drunk and driving and being actually extremely drunk. And she tried to say that she knows the sheriff, whose name is not Sherry Jeridan, but Jerry Sheridan. And this was unveiled recently in some documents. And, I think that normally we don't cover just random people's DEIs, but she's a pretty influential figure. She has actually a pretty big following. A lot of people listen to what she has to say. She was driving off from an event where she'd been with Attorney General candidate and Senate President Warren Peterson and posted a picture of that. So just sort of an interesting and bizarre situation.
Yeah, Jim, former Maricopa County Attorney Andrew Thomas, he was kind of a prosecutor for him. And boy, we remember those days when they were going after judges, they were going after supervisors. Everyone was involved in RICO. Everyone was involved in some sort of this, that. She got disbarred, I believe, did she not? Or was she just, was that suspended?
She had her law license suspended. She was one of Thomas's right-hand person in a lot of that. And she got one of his top lieutenants in that. And she got her license suspended, and then I think essentially just never really reapplied to get it reinstated.
Okay, so William, we got 2 counts of extreme DUI. I think it was 3 times the limit here, like a 2.3 or something like that. And she was described by police as argumentative, stuporous, and incoherent. As Cameron mentioned, we don't always do this kind of stuff, but she keeps a public profile to some degree. She certainly had a public profile in the past, and she blamed liberals and Democrats.
Surprise, surprise. Not a big surprise for Ms. Alexander on this, given that with all of her issues with the bar, or with the Supreme Court, she blames the court and the bar for coming after her, not her history of being a top lieutenant for a man who was going after political prosecutions. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they were going to rig the breathalyzer or however they ended up testing her blood alcohol level, how the liberals got in there and did that, but it kind of reminds me of former Senator Justine Wadsack, who we saw
I was thinking the same thing.
Pulled over for speeding, and then it said that was some sort of liberal plot, and somehow they knew where to put the Tucson police officer to catch her. I don't know. So this is just, when in doubt, blame lawfare, blame, the scary liberals hiding behind the bed. If it's a DUI, cop to it, do your time or your suspended license or whatever the penalty ends up being, and get on with your life.
Pay the fine and move on. Hey, before we go, we got to move on here, Jim, but real quickly, the governor vetoed a bill that would link contraception to adoption information. What was that all about?
It was a bill that would have required in every school in Arizona, K-12 schools all the way up to public universities and colleges, any information, like a university health clinic, if you go get an STD test or you get information on contraception, any incidences like that, the student would have to be given a packet of information on adoption. And the governor vetoed it and basically said, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And these things aren't really connected. People are going for health care. They're not,
Right.
There might be a time and a place for information on adoption, but this isn't it.
And every time you get an STD test, every single time you have to be told about adoption. I just find it hard to believe that people don't know about the concept of adoption. And every single time you're doing it seems excessive, especially, people use condoms for things besides contraception. So, whatever.
So basically, the governor said, why don't you find a better way to get kids into safer and happier homes?
Yeah, the governor said, I love adoption. She's a big supporter of it. She pointed to some money she's put towards trying to improve adoption rates and things like that. But she just, like Jim said, she said, this isn't the place to do it. You think telling some college kid that, adoption exists while they're going to get contraception or something else even if they do end up getting pregnant, they're going to be like 9 months later, like, oh, I'm glad I had this pamphlet. Now I know what my options are.
It's kind of a response to 139, don't you think? The enshrining the adoption.
Oh, 100%. It's one of, a dozen or two dozen bills that Republicans have been pushing that are aimed at undermining that.
All right, panel, good to have you. Thanks for joining us. That's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
When you want to be more inspired, Arizona PBS delivers unforgettable experiences in music, theater, and the arts, thanks to members like you and
So many Arizonans